when a secluded fire watchman witnesses a brutal battle of savage beasts, the thin veil between nightmare and reality begins to unravel. I am Mr. Midnight Hollow, your chilling host, bringing you today's episode of Terrifying Encounters. If you're already part of our community, your support means the world to us. Each like, comment, and share helps uncover more stories like this. Or subscribe to see what rises from the depths of darkness and unfolds before you. Now, let's begin. The chill of December swept through Asheville, North Carolina, sinking into bones and stinging against every patch of exposed skin. The city sprawled at the edge of the Appalachian woods, rugged and ancient, but on nights like this, even the brick and neon felt like fragile refuges. The Blue Ridges looming to the west grew monstrous as the sun declined, shadows swallowing the familiar streets of Bowcatcher Mountain, where I, Darren Yazzie, sat alone in a battered fire watch tower. For years, this tower had been my domain, a sanctuary where the old forest's rhythms played out in predictable cycles. But tonight, an oppressive silence pressed into every slat of wood, and nothing felt predictable. I ran my hand along the cold railing, knuckles white, eyes straining through binoculars scuffed by 1,000 anxious grips. My evenings followed a precise ritual of scanning for smoke and faulty radio signals, jotting notes about animal migrations and mysterious lights. But tonight each routine offered only hollow comfort. Reports of missing hikers had come all week. First, a teenage couple rumored to have strayed too far from the Hidden Lake Trail. Then, an experienced hunter whose dog returned alone, stained with blood, neither the hound nor the owner could claim. The local news buzzed about coyotes, maybe a big cat, but nobody believed those answers except the city manager. Among the forest folk, the old superstitions came flooding back. Talk of skinwalkers, haunted places up by the cliffs, and ancestral curses that preyed on the weak after sunset. I was raised to scoff at such tales, but dread pooled in my stomach, heavy and relentless. By 7 p.m., night crept in fully. The tower was shrouded in mist. My breath outlined each exhale in shaky bursts, and I lit a cigarette just for the warmth. Its glow barely illuminated the inside of the glass as I peered out, hyper-aware of every branch, every flicker. That's when I saw movement. Dark and massive beyond the split pine. Too tall, at least 7 feet, and thick as a prize stallion, but moving with a strange, swaying grace. I froze, pulse pounding painfully in my chest, and tried to convince myself it was just a vagrant bear, maybe a prankster hoping to scare up a viral clip. The truth was harder. No bear stood so upright, nor watched a man with eyes that burned red like embers. I jerked the binoculars to my face, heart hammering so loud it seemed to chase away the silence. The creature emerged in full, stepping onto a patch of damp leaves with deliberate intent. Its fur was matted and thick, rippling under harsh moonlight, jagged with scars and old wounds. Its face, distantly reminiscent of a wolf's but stretched and distorted, bore enormous fangs visible in the thin beam from my lantern. Suddenly, another shadow crashed into the clearing. I gasped, nearly dropping the binoculars, as two beasts stood nose to nose. The first, black-furred and hulking, the other almost as large but streaked with dirty gray, its ribs jutting beneath torn fur. Neither moved for a moment, but their hostility was palpable. Old enemies, driven by a rivalry that echoed back through ages. No human sound passed between them, only the subtle posturing of predators measuring one another. The violence erupted with a suddenness that defied reason. They collided, claws lacerating flesh, jaws searching for purchase at throats and shoulders. The bigger beast drove the smaller onto its back, teeth sinking deep, blood spraying and pooling across the muddy leaves. The fight unfolded barely 100 feet below my tower, a grotesque ballet of torture and rage. Limbs were shredded, bones crunched, and the terrible sounds carried through the cold air, unsoftened by mercy. My hands trembled, legs locked in place as I watched. Every shred of reason told me to run, call for help, do anything but witness this. But horror rooted me, forced me to see the truth. These were not animals as we knew them. They were monsters, products of curses older than Appalachian stone. The black beast overpowered its rival, delivering brutal blows until the gray one ceased struggling. As the victor began to feed, tearing flesh in calculated, sickening bites, I covered my mouth, fighting back nausea. The crunch of bone, the languid spilling of blood, stained the night with dread that transcended anything I'd ever imagined. And then it paused. Red eyes, glistening beneath streaks of gore, settled on my tower. I ducked instinctively, knuckles aching with pressure as the creature stared for what felt like an eternity. Could it see me? Or was it waiting, savoring the next hunt? I remained paralyzed. Until morning crept into the sky. The woods never quite returned to peace. Birds did not sing. Rabbits did not move. I clutched my rifle, now less a tool than a talisman, and wished I believed in prayers stronger than my own. Every snap of a twig, every shift in the mist, whispered that my private sanctuary was now a front-row seat to a war nothing human could survive. Sleep never followed sunrise. The hours after dawn ticked by in a haze of fractured nerves. Asheville glowed distantly beneath the fog as dozens of sirens pierced the early quiet, echoing up Bowcatcher Mountain. Every shadow that shifted in the valley set my pulse hammering. Every gust of wind rattling the lookout glass reminded me of claws on metal. I poured stale coffee and watched familiar woods transform into an alien landscape, each dark cluster of trees, each ragged patch of mud taunting me with memory. My report had been stammered out in shaky bursts to headquarters. I tried describing the monsters, the violence, the feeding. My radio crackled in reply, never quite believing or denying. By noon, Andrew Redtail arrived, boots thumping up the spiral steps, his Choctaw tattoos half hidden by shirt sleeves. He was older, broad-shouldered, built by decades of honest labor and tangled roots in these mountains. His silence as I recounted the previous night's massacre was almost a comfort. Neither of us needed to say out loud that something in Asheville had changed forever. Andrew nodded gravely, jaw clenched. My grandmother warned me about curses, about those who couldn't move on. He stared at the blood-stained binoculars on my desk and let the dread linger. This place, it's got old wounds. Might be tonight they open for good. We hiked together to the clearing as the city's noon bells tolled, boots sinking into loam slick with old blood. The trees were ruined. Deep gouges shredded bark, broken branches littered the ground. Patches of fur fluttered in the breeze, some charcoal, some ash. Andrew collected the largest, careful not to touch any with bare skin. Not bear, not a wolf either. Whatever did this meant business. A shattered jawbone hung from a stripped sapling. In a patch of dark mud, footprints sprawled, huge, half human, half beast, edges blurred as if something in the ground recoiled from the touch. The air stank of copper and rot, and for one awful moment I wondered if the flesh between the trees might not belong only to animals. Andrew knelt, whispering old Choctaw prayers under his breath. We returned to the tower, minds heavy, and braced for nightfall. The radio chattered with news of more missing hikers, frightened pets, strangers seen prowling the edge of the woods. Mara Ironhorse, county deputy, boots caked in clay, eyes sharp as razors, arrived at dusk, her battered cruiser still warm from 100 frantic calls. She stalked the tower's cramped hallway, reading the dread in our faces and the carnage in our words. They're not drunk, not high. People know fear when they meet it, she drawled, voice low. She claimed a corner with a metal cot and loaded her revolver with fresh rounds. Nobody leaves tonight. If they want us, make 'em come and earn it. Storms gathered, pelting the roof with freezing rain as evening turned electric. Every bolt of lightning threw the room into sharp relief. 3 exhausted, armed survivors waiting for a nightmare to return. Mara checked the window locks twice. Andrew loaded shells in methodical silence. At midnight, the generator coughed, stuttered, died. The tower plunged into blackness, and flashlights flickered awake. Shadows moved outside, their silhouettes grotesque, impossibly large, pacing around the steel base. The sound of claws rasping against aluminum made Mara's hand twitch on her pistol grip. Andrew whispered prayers that scratched at memory and fear. A sudden impact shattered the quiet. The back door buckled, metal shrieking as it bent under a force no ordinary man or animal possessed. Footsteps thundered up the stairwell. The 3 of us raised our weapons, teeth clenched, knees shaking. The lock gave way with a screech. The door ripped off its hinges and flung aside. Something massive, tall, hunched, breathing the cold in ragged rushes, filled the entry with nightmare shadow. Its red eyes shone in the beam of a trembling flashlight. Andrew fired, the shotgun's roar swallowed by the storm. Mara emptied her revolver, each shot answered by guttural snarls. I tried to hold the beast in my sights, barrel trembling, breath coming in gasps. It was fast, slashing at the walls, lunging for Andrew, dragging him back until Mara tackled the monster, elbows smashing into its muzzle. The fight was brutal, desperate, all 3 of us bleeding by the minute. Something crashed outside. Another beast? The night was chaos, claws and blood, old curses, frantic prayers. The city lights below flickered, indifferent as we screamed in fear and fury. The chapter closed with the knowledge that nothing was finished. The monsters hadn't come for revenge, not even for food. They came for war. And war, once started, never leaves by dawn. We didn't sleep. After the night's assault, Andrew, Mara, and I limped through the first light of dawn, battered, bleeding, jittery with adrenaline. The wind outside the battered fire tower carried an animal stench, and every hour someone caught sight of those red eyes glinting in the shadows beyond the pines. Never close, never far enough. Sheriff's cars blazed up from Asheville, lights flashing blue against the morning mist. The deputies who arrived found clawed footprints and splintered siding. They tried making jokes. Just a bear. But the dread was infectious. Andrew's bandaged arms trembled as he led them through pools of dried blood at the tower's base. Mara's face was drawn and gray, but she never put down her revolver even when giving her report. When the law left to canvass the valley, we crowded around the radio, desperate for news or hope. All we got was an endless stream of fresh terror. More missing hikers, a camping family's tent ripped apart at Black Balsam Knob, a shepherd's entire flock torn to rags and bone. Photographs of the carnage filtered up the chain. Flesh riven, bones snapped, tracks so large they dwarfed a man's boots. Inside the tower, we argued in whispers about our options. Mara wanted to assemble a posse. Andrew muttered bitterly about fighting devils with sticks. I clung to routine, plotting places on old paper maps, watching for signs, scribbling everything down. What else could we do? What plan could possibly stop what couldn't be killed? Daylight dragged on, each hour more anxious than the last. We tried to eat canned stew and beans, but nothing stayed down. The dread that burrowed in my chest consumed every attempt at reason. The memory of beasts fighting like titans. The feeling of being prey no law or logic could protect. Night returned with merciless speed. Again the tower seemed to shrink. Storm clouds covered the moon, making the void beyond our windows absolute. Far in the trees, eyes blinked, 1, then 2, then 3, the lights vanishing and reappearing without pattern. In the blackest hour, something smashed through the forest below. Trees snapped, rocks tumbled, voices rose in panicked radio bursts from the nearest patrol. We tracked the chaos with our flashlights, waiting for the evil to select us again. Then there was silence, heavy and total. Not even the wind moved. Suddenly, the generator flickered back to life. The tower's lights returned, and I saw, etched in muddy streaks on the glass, a shape clawed by a monstrous hand. A warning, or perhaps a claim. The three of us crouched together in the flickering glow, weapons loaded, hearts racing. Mara forced a whisper. "They want us scared. They're hunting, but not for food." My blood ran cold. I realized, as our shadows jumped against the walls, that we weren't witnesses. We were bait. And the beasts were closing in, not for a kill, but for the start of something larger. The morning light offered no comfort, only a pale wash over a mountain scarred by violence. The sheriff's department swarmed the area in trucks and jeeps, ropes of caution tape fluttering in the cold breeze like grim flags. Mara, Andrew, and I stood amidst the chaos, our eyes haunted with sleepless dread. Only hours ago, we'd fought for survival inside the crumbling fire watchtower. Now, more reports flooded radios, of mutilated livestock, shattered campsites, and vanished hikers. The worst part, these weren't isolated incidents. They traced a terrifying circuit of terror winding deep into the uncharted wilds. I moved through the bloodied clearing again, boots squelching in the damp mud, fingers brushing over claw marks jagged deep into the bark. Andrew's hand was steady on my shoulder, but his gaze was fixed on something unseen. "Each strike," he murmured, "a message, a warning. The old ways aren't finished." Mara's voice cut through the tensions, sharp and pragmatic. "This is a war now. Their vendetta isn't personal. It's ancient. And we're the latest pawns." I wanted to scream, to run, to pretend this nightmare was just a fevered hallucination. Instead, the storm darkened again, storm thick like blood in the sky. The town below barely stirred, unaware of the hell unfolding just beyond. Talk of skinwalkers and wolves was muted beneath layers of disbelief and normalcy. When dusk fell, Mara gathered a small posse of sharpshooters and locals. The plan: push into the dense woods, find traces, if not bodies, and repel whatever lurked beyond the boundary. We had rifles, grit, and desperate hope against things forged from nightmare. The forest swallowed us whole, its shadows curling like smoke, its silence heavier than the rifle cases in our hands. Every rustle was a betrayal, every scent a lure. The thick canopy blocked stars. The moon was a ghostly smear through the pines. Hours stretched, no answers. Then, a scream. A raw, ragged sound of primal terror and pain carried on the wind. We sprinted toward it, breaths ragged, bullets ready. Breaking into a clearing, we saw the aftermath. A torn body, unrecognizable beneath mud and blood, torn apart with savagery no animal could match. Nearby, footprints, half human, half beast, stamped deeply, leading further into the merciless dark. Andrew knelt beside the wreckage, shaking his head. "This isn't nature, it's vengeance." Back in the tower, exhaustion battled adrenaline. Mara reloaded her pistol, voice low. "They're watching us, every move, every breath." Then came the howls, low, guttural, and angry, echoing through the valley as if announcing a claim. This was their domain, and we were trespassers doomed to fall. The woods were eating Asheville alive. Only one truth remained. We were the hunted now. Asheville's residents remained blissfully unaware of the nightmare lurking just beyond the city limits. But the forest whispered its dark secrets on winds that chilled to the bone, carrying rumors of death and disappearance. The sheriff's department organized armored patrols, but the beasts struck with cunning, slipping through every perimeter like shadows come alive. Mara's team found themselves engaged in a series of bloody, desperate clashes in the tangled woods near Craggy Gardens. One evening, they lost Corey Finch, a reckless young hunter with more bravado than caution. His last radio transmission crackled with frantic, terrified words before silence swallowed his voice. Corey's body was found the next day, his flesh torn to ribbons, his blood no longer running red, but a thick, strange black substance that soaked the leaf litter beneath him. His eyes stared vacantly at the gray sky, a silent testament to the horror that claimed him. The town's anxiety swelled. Families barred windows early, children whispered prayers, and the forest's sinister reputation grew. Andrew, Mara, and I banded together, sharing stories while tending to wounds both physical and mental. Our fight was no longer just survival. It was a war of attrition against a dark legacy. The creatures weren't mindless predators. They carried the weight of ancient curses, and with each kill, the curse's hold tightened. At night, howls surrounded us, each one a battle cry, a warning, a promise of more carnage. Every patrol returned with more questions, fewer answers, and deeper scratches on flesh and spirit. Our last hope lay in a forgotten stone altar Andrew discovered, covered in moss and carved with symbols from a time before history. Ancient legends hinted this place might hold the key to ending the horror, but reaching it meant confronting the monstrous forces head-on. No one knew if we'd make it. The ancient forest cloaked us beneath a tapestry of twisted branches and whispered curses as we approached the moss-covered altar, whose stones seemed older than time. Andrew led the way, his voice a low chant of Choctaw prayers meant to shield us from the darkness pressing from all sides. Mara gripped her rifle with eyes flickering among the shadows, every sense stretched taut by the howls pulsing through the pine-laden night, the cries of beasts driven by furious, unfathomable hunger. The trees themselves seemed to hold their breath as shapes dissolved in the spaces where light dared not reach. Their presence menacing, eyes aflame in the gloom beyond our flashlights. The wind bore low, primal growls as these creatures charged with merciless velocity, a blur of teeth and claws that tore the veil between nightmare and reality. Mara's shots echoed, fleeting sparks in the storm of bloodshed, while Andrew's heavy branch shattered against a snarling skull. I fired repetitively, the recoil biting into my shoulder but never halting the onslaught. Limbs flailed, bodies crashed against twisted oaks, the very earth soaked crimson beneath our desperate feet. Blood slick and suffused with terror pooled beneath us, cries of rage and pain melding with ancient evocations from Andrew's lips, promises against the relentless curse that bound these creatures and decayed the wilderness around us. The forest itself seemed to pulse with a dark life, the altar's stones glowing, emanating chill power that rippled outward, causing the beast to falter in a frenzy of confusion. We saw then, the altar was not a relic, but the nerve center of the curse ensnaring our world. To break it, to sever these chains, required a sacrifice graver than any we'd imagined, demanding cunning beyond our fractured courage. Every heartbeat thudded in looming shadow as the beings charged once more, and the forest waited with hungry eyes. The clearing lay drenched in the aftermath of violence, a haunting tableau of limbs twisted in the mud and shattered branches strewn like the remnants of a nightmare. The moon hung low in the iron sky, casting pale light over bloodied earth and the shattered remains of the two beasts locked in mortal conflict. The air was thick with the metallic smell of fresh blood and the acrid sting of burnt wood from the lingering embers of our makeshift fire. Mara limped beside me, her face smeared with sweat and grime, eyes hollow, yet burning with unyielding resolve. Andrew leaned heavily on a crude staff, his usually sure hands trembling as he clutched it, stained by his own wounds that refused to cease bleeding. Every breath we drew was ragged and shallow, a cacophony of pounding hearts and primal fear echoing through the night. The dark werewolf stood tall and menacing over the crumpled form of its gray adversary, muscles rippling beneath a coat matted with blood and gore, teeth bared in a perpetual snarl that sent shivers down my spine. Its eyes, still glowing with an infernal, unholy red light, scanned the clearing with a chilling intelligence that brooked no challenge, no supplication. This was no mere predator acting on instinct. This was a creature steeped in age-old malice, an avatar of vengeance and destruction, and we were nothing more than trespassers in its realm. Andrew's voice cut through the tense silence, hoarse but resolute. The ritual. The one whispered about in our old chants and stories. It can break the curse, sever the bond that chains them to this wretched existence. But it demands sacrifice. It demands cunning. He turned toward Mara and me, eyes shining with a grim determination that mirrored our own. There is no turning back. Tonight we face the darkness in its purest form. The weapons we carried felt heavy, burdened with the weight of our own mortality as much as with the burden of this ancient battle. We stepped cautiously forward, each footfall muffled by damp moss and broken twigs. The beasts circled us, their growls reverberating through the clearing like the rumblings of an approaching storm. Mara gripped her rifle tighter, knuckles white beneath the grime, eyes sharp and calculating. The first shot rang out, loud and unforgiving, echoing through the trees as a bullet tore into the beast's flank. The creature staggered, a deep guttural snarl ripping from its throat, but it quickly recovered, muscles coiling as it lunged with terrifying speed. The fight erupted anew, a whirlwind of claws, teeth, and fury, a dance of death that blurred the edges of reality. Mara screamed as razor-sharp claws raked across her side, a searing pain blossoming beneath her bloodied shirt. Andrew swung his staff with desperate fervor, the wood splintering against the beast's snarling visage. I fired my shotgun repeatedly, the smell of gunpowder blending with the scent of wet fur and coppery blood. Limbs were torn, bodies thrown against trees, the earth itself seeming to weep beneath the carnage. Blood pooled beneath our feet, a morbid testament to the savagery unfolding in the moonlight. The howls, raw, agonized, and furious, filled the air, a chorus of despair and rage that hinted at a force older and more relentless than any of us dared imagine. The very trees seemed to lean closer, their twisted branches reaching like fingers, spectators to this primal war. In the midst of battle, the altar, an ancient stone monolith encrusted with moss and cryptic carvings, began to glow with an eerie luminescence. Symbols once faded by time shone anew, bathing the clearing in an otherworldly light that pulsed like the heartbeat of the forest itself. The beasts faltered, their roars turning into confused snarls as they recoiled from the altar's power. Andrew gasped, clutching his chest as the realization hit him like a thunderclap. The altar was the source, the repository of the curse that bound these monsters to this haunted realm. Destroying or cleansing it was our only hope, but doing so would surely come at a cost that none of us understood, much less desired. As the radiant glow expanded, the air shimmered with unseen energy, and the forest seemed to hold its breath. The battle reached a fevered pitch, and with one last roar, the dark werewolf surged forward in a desperate, final charge. I met it head-on, my shotgun blasting a spray of pellets into its snarling jaws, staggering it momentarily. Mara seized the moment, plunging a knife deep into the creature's side. Andrew raised the ancient staff above his head, chanting in a language older than the trees, the words vibrating with raw power. The beast howled, a sound that ripped through the night, shaking the very ground beneath us. Blood poured from its wounds like a river of black fire, and with a final, shuddering breath, it collapsed, its life ebbing away into the soil that had long been its prison. Silence fell, profound and complete. But the altar continued to glow, its light wrapping around us like a shroud, warning of consequences yet to come. We had won this battle, but the war for the soul of Asheville, the war writ in blood and shadow, was far from over. The darkness clung to the forest like a living shroud as we prepared for the final confrontation. Mara's breathing was ragged, each inhalation a reminder of wounds that would not heal quickly. Andrew's eyes, sharp despite fatigue, flicked between the altar and the looming figure of the dark werewolf, the air thick with anticipation and terror. The clearing seemed suspended in time, every sound amplified. The crackle of dead leaves underfoot, the distant howl of hungry beasts, the slow beating of my own heart like a war drum. The dark werewolf stood, a monstrous titan towering over its fallen gray rival. Its fur was soaked with blood, muscles taut beneath slick skin, eyes glowing like embers in the night. It was no longer merely a creature of flesh. It was imbued with ancient malice, a living embodiment of a curse that had festered for centuries. As it locked its gaze on us, I felt something primal stir inside me, a mixture of dread and defiance. Andrew began the ritual, his voice low and steady, weaving incantations lost to time. Symbols etched into the ancient altar shimmered with an eerie light, casting elongated shadows that danced like specters. Mara raised her rifle, aiming with a precision born of desperation, sending bullets tearing through the air. The wolf reacted instantly, a savage roar that shook the very earth, and charged. The battle erupted into chaos, a violent symphony of growls, gunfire, and the sickening sound of claws rending flesh. Mara's scream pierced the night as a savage blow tore across her side, blood blooming rapidly. Andrew swung a sturdy branch, crashing it against the creature's head with enough force to cause it to stagger, but the beast retaliated with terrifying speed, swiping at him with fatal intent. I fired repeatedly, each blast a prayer against the darkness pressing in. The werewolf snarled, its eyes flashing with fury and pain, and lunged at me, jaws snapping inches from my face. I ducked, barely avoiding the crushing bite, feeling the cold rush of wound as razor claws grazed my arm, searing agony exploding through my skin. The altar pulsed brighter, the air vibrating with raw energy, and for a moment, the creatures faltered, dazed by the ancient power awakening around them. Andrew's chant rose in intensity, the symbols glowing fiercely as if awakening the very spirit of the forest. The werewolf let out a howl of rage, a deep, bone-chilling sound that echoed through the mountains. With one final surge, Mara plunged a knife deep into the beast's shoulder, and I lunged forward, driving a sharpened branch into its chest. Blood poured, dark and thick, as the creature convulsed violently before collapsing onto the cold earth. The moonlight bathed the clearing in a ghostly glow as the curse's hold began to fade, the oppressive weight lifting from the air. Breathing heavily, we stood over the fallen creature, exhaustion and relief washing over us in equal measure. But the altar's light dimmed slowly, a warning that the battle was won, but the war was far from over. The forest whispered its secrets, ancient and unyielding, as the night held its breath once more. Darren's ordeal in the shadows of Asheville is a harrowing testament to the relentless terror lurking beyond the edge of civilization. The battle between ancient curses and modern survival has only just begun, and we'll be here to uncover the dark consequences still unfolding. If the fear gripped you, like this video, and tell us in the comments which moment chilled you the most. Share this with someone who needs to know that some legends never die. They only grow darker. And if you want to stand guarded against the unknown, Subscribe to Minster Midnight Horror and ring the bell, so you never face the night alone.